What if legacy gave you an opportunity to build a network effect when it comes to your family and your community? I'd like to welcome Ben Johnson to the Design Your Legacy podcast this lovely Friday. Welcome, Ben.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And would you share a little bit about yourself in terms of an icebreaker with the listeners? I think you're joining today from Texas in the United States.
Yeah, so I'm in the Dallas area. I'm a serial entrepreneur, usually in the technical co-founder seat, and I've built five businesses from start to exit.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. And I did have an opportunity to view your uh, profile on LinkedIn, and there's some amazing companies and opportunities that you have been a part of. So I'm looking forward to the business angle you're going to bring to this legacy topic.
Yeah, great. I'm excited to do it.
Okay. Okay. So let's start at the beginning. What inspired you to become a serial tech founder, and how did those early experiences shape the vision behind what you're doing today, which is Particle 41?
Yeah, I had a paper route when I was in middle school, about sixth grade. So in order to be able to afford to have the kicks that my friends had and have a Nintendo Entertainment System, I went and got a paper route, and just have been an entrepreneur from a really young age and into tech. I had a Commodore 64 and just really enjoyed the intersection of business and technology.
Well, that's wonderful. So were you growing up in Texas or was it another state up north?
I grew up in Colorado, but now I've lived in Texas longer than I lived anywhere else, so I'm a Texan now. I think that's the criteria. If you've lived in one place for longer than you lived anywhere else, then that's where you're really from.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. I just noticed a couple of different locations on the LinkedIn profile. So I wondered, is he from Minnesota or one of those states up north? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Colorado and then Texas. But my parents went to high school in Texas, so we had deep Texas roots.
Oh, that's wonderful. So how did those early experiences then shape Particle 41? Was it the discipline of the paper route, or did you just see the network of the neighborhood where I've got to drop the paper
Yeah.
on 10 streets, but in 1 hour or
Yeah. No, so out of college, I was an early employee for an online travel company. I started a vertical ad network, which was kind of pioneering this idea of having an ad network focused on a particular industry. So I built one in travel, one in finance. Um, and so this idea of going from low revenue to high enough revenue to grab interest of investors and really brought me to what we do at Particle 41. So in online advertising, the intersection between software, data, and your cloud environment is all very much part of that equation. And so Particle 41 really was born from the same experience I had starting up these companies. I have some of the same employees that I worked with on my first travel company. They're just the team here is kind of amassed from my past experiences building businesses, and now we lease our teams to other people and help them to accelerate their ideas.
Oh, that's awesome. And out of curiosity, the name Particle 41, is it because data is like a particle, or what is the...
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. So the 41st element in the periodic table is niobium. Didn't really want to name the company that, but what's
That
really
would be a
cool about
mouthful.
yeah, what's really cool about that element, if you were a child in the 80s, you might remember this pop metal jewelry that was anodized, so it's kind of a rainbow color, and it came in everywhere. It was on all the things. But in the steel, like if you're going to make pipe or you're going to do things with steel, then you'll add that element to it to make it stronger and more flexible. So yeah, the Particle 41, when you add it to your business, it makes it stronger and more flexible. So that's where we rested on company name and branding.
Oh, that's awesome. That is a cool story. I was a child of the 80s, but I was overseas. So there are some references of American culture that I completely missed.
Yeah. If you're in the mall walking past some of those costume jewelry places, it would just be filled with, at least a rack or two that would be all this rainbow pop metal jewelry. And that was niobium that was allowing that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I read on the internet, you'll have to tell me if this is true or not in preparation for today in the due diligence, that Particle 41's mission is to help companies accelerate through software development, development ops, and data science. And so, if that is true, according to the internet, how can these technologies then play a role in helping businesses with their corporate legacies?
Yeah. So
And maybe it's as
many
simple as they just need to stay alive, but keep going.
Yeah, yeah. So modernizing your software is, the software. One of my friends said software stops changing when the last user dies. That's kind of you have to continue to modernize and improve your offering. And now customers expect a digital experience when they're interacting with your brand. Doesn't matter if you're a landscaper or, an enterprise SaaS company. You should have your technology should support a world-class customer experience. Um, we know from companies like Chick-fil-A that having an amazing experience is what sets you apart. And so we feel like we can help improve the legacy of a brand by just really helping them have amazing customer experiences that are digitally enhanced.
That's really interesting. I almost thought a couple of times that I should buy the domain of legacy.ai because people these days are so drawn to that digital experience that you're referring to. Even if in the website it could offer hardcover coffee table books, but on the onset, I think many people these days just have this virtual focus regarding where the soccer ball is getting kicked to in society.
Yeah, I would agree. That legacy AI domain sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's
Reminds
really
me of,
expensive though. I'd have to buy it from someone else.
yeah, right.
It's like
Yeah,
probably over
that's a,
$10,000 or 100,000. It's such a great idea.
yeah, that's a good one. Just reminds me of all the stuff with that we tend to save from our kids, and now we can take pictures of it and enjoy it digitally, rather than keeping all the finger painting pictures and all of that laying around forever.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah. So you've led remote teams. I understand from prior podcasts, the internet, et cetera, for over 20 years. What is one lesson about leadership or within your legacy's wisdom today that only remote work can teach? Because a lot of times business is changing. People are working, partly from home and partly in an actual office. And I just was curious.
Yeah, people want to do a good job from anywhere. So they don't, to do a good job, I don't think you need to return to office, this big RTO push that's happening right now. And I found that teammates who, the kind of the biggest challenge that they're struggling with is the imposter syndrome. So the way to get through that is to challenge, to have strong challenges and show people that even though this was super challenging, we could do it and we could do it together. So overcoming the imposter syndrome is not always about being nice, but about being kind. It can be not necessarily caring about the emotions because we experience stress and emotion as we grow. So growing through the imposter syndrome, not trying to enable it is what we found is the best thing towards their legacy. So if they're like, "Hey, I'm professionals like us do things like this. Professionals like us don't do things like that." Um, by really talking internally about what is our identity, what are our values as a professional, and then having the challenges to support that growth. I think that's the way to create a legacy.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think with especially with remote work, probably less politics come into play because there's not a group of people together in one office suite.
Yeah, we have to do creative things remote work can become transactional.
Okay.
So we can kind of sense that at times where folks are feeling a little more transactional. So we have to be careful to make sure that we're doing digital happy hours and bringing people together. We have a small group program we call squads, and it brings a small group of about 8 people to a professional forum where they can talk about their personal challenges, their family relationships, and get to know each other a little more deeply. And we've created a program to facilitate that. So remote work is great for reducing those distractions. You know, the water
Mm.
cooler is not there to distract. But then on the other side, we have to make sure that we're maintaining human connection.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic, especially with companies and businesses these days. How do you do it well to make teams work? And then what is it, in terms of the blind spots? Because theory is great, but then it's just when you hit the ground running, that's a whole other thing in real time, like you had said about emotion and stress when you're growing. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have the team that a person reports to, which is really their execution team. That's going to be a transactional relationship because they're organizing and they're going after the client's mission to accomplish that. And of course, that is our core business. But then we have squads, which is a more interpersonal relationship for people to talk about what does it mean to be a professional? What does it mean to keep your work-life balance in check and to continue to support your family?
Yeah, I think it's great, and you're a pioneer. I'm looking on LinkedIn, and it says, I'm passionate about empowering forward-thinking companies to accelerate their growth through innovative technology solutions. And so, again, it's like, where is business going tomorrow? I used to work as a commercial real estate broker, and I remember during COVID, all of the office spaces that were empty. And again, it's like, well, where is business going? And then there was a whole increase of industrial buildings because of Amazon. I mean, not just because of Amazon, but all of a sudden there was much more of a need if things were getting delivered and in one sector versus another. So it's, where the human race is going and where innovation is going. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. I'm obviously in the legacy business, so I'm outside of that bubble, but in some senses, but yeah, I'm not the one in the on the football field, throwing the ball.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So with your tech background, how do you balance that hands-on innovation then with high-level strategic thinking?
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, you have to work on the business, not just in the business. So I use techniques like in EOS, there's a really cool technique, which is like having a thought meeting. And so just taking a moment and like, hey, are we doing the right things? I'm also
Mm.
really inspired by the one thing. Like, what is the one thing that I should be working on to help improve the strategy? What are my customers curious about, and am I talking about those things? Um, so yeah, the practical answer is you have to have thinking time. Like you have to really and structure it, write down your ideas, prioritize them, um, and then still have make time to support the team and ask those personal questions and make sure you're connecting with your leadership team and the folks that are driving your business forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really cool best practice.
Yeah, the EOS is great for things like that. I've grabbed numerous things from that practice that are helping to navigate between working on the business and in the business.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. That I was listening to Brandon Burchard this morning as I was part of my morning ritual, and I think there's a lot of best practices that when they get incorporated, only bring out the potential more in individuals, no matter the challenges that they're facing, or yeah, that
Yeah, one thing I've recently realized is that when it comes to commitment, that the commitments that you make to yourself, why are those important? Because those are so easily negotiated, right? If I make a commitment to a client, or I make a commitment to my wife, then I have somebody to hold me accountable to those commitments. But the commitments that I make to myself, I can just renegotiate them with myself. Um, but I think a lot of folks will prioritize their commitments. And if we do that, then our commitment's really meaningful, or our commitment's only as good as our current priorities. So I've
mm.
started to discuss with some of my coaching clients and um, some of my friends is like, what if all commitments were equal in weight? If I make a commitment, even to myself, it's of the same weight as the commitments I make to my wife or the commitments I make to a client. What does that do for me? Well, it would make me much more careful about making a commitment, and then it would make it much more likely that all my commitments would be met. And so not prioritizing commitments, but giving commitments of equal weight, even the ones that I make to myself.
Oh, that's very honest. because in someone's mind, they can flake on a commitment to themselves. And if no one else notices, it's like the tree falling in the middle of the forest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But then, yeah, what does that do? Like, if I'm not a person of my word, even to myself, then am I really a person of my word?
Mm. Wow, that's a tweetable moment right there.
Thank you.
Before we jump into the legacy portion, because I've got a bunch of questions here that are legacy specific, what can Particle 41 do for, let's say, your ideal customer or client? Because I read its description, but I didn't quite fully wrap my mind around it.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, like we help accelerate their digital vision. We're extremely good at custom software.
Okay.
Um, but what I work with them on is like technology products, digital products are you already using? How does the customer traverse across those? So, what's the customer journey through your digital tools? And then what are the opportunities to make you truly different in your space? And as we discuss that and we get really clear, then there are opportunities for typically the things that you want that will make your brand different are the things that you're going to heavily customize so that you are a unique voice in your business. And so whether that for your business is a mobile app, whether that's a software platform, um, that is what we help you do is be truly uniquely different to your customer through a world-class digital experience.
Okay, so that's great. So, like, let's say I'm just making this up and I'm putting you on the spot right now. So,
Sure.
let's say you're working with like a yachting company. I guess you would have an app for their yacht
Yeah,
brand.
if we looked at the tools that they already have, they already squared away on collaborating with each other. They already have a CRM that they like using. We would consult them on those things. And then, yeah, what's going to make you truly different is a mobile app to rent a yacht or to service the yachts. I actually built a company called Dockworks, which helped people who work on boats manage the work orders, and then they would give the boat owner a complete digital service history. And when you own a boat and you want to maintain its value, maintaining that service history is super important. And then we sold that to Dock Master, who already owned all of the marine service shops and had marine service software. So it was a great marriage of that SaaS tool with their existing clients. And so, yeah, whatever is going to make your brand uniquely different in the market, that's what you need to invest in and focus on for within the space that we cover within software.
Okay, that's wonderful. So it's like part marketing, part tech.
Sure, we're not a marketing firm, but we go at it from a customer angle. We could say from customer to code.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I understand better now. Very cool. Okay, so since this is a legacy podcast, what does the word legacy mean to you personally?
For me personally, it's the memory around what you've done. It's what how will people remember what I've done and the impact that I've created.
Oh, that's awesome. So I guess that is, in one sense, what you would like your holistic legacy to be.
Yeah, definitely. But I am a Christian. I am faith-based, and so I think what we say in my family is that we're living the legacy of Christ for generations to build God's kingdom. So. Um, that's all my boys have that memorized, and we really feel like what we're doing is we're honoring what Christ did for us, and now we're living that out. So and then so why? Because we want to help others and build God's kingdom. So what is the impact that we're having even in our daily lives, even outside of our profession, to build a strong family? And then how is our family showing up to others, serving others, helping others? Um, so, um, and part of that is our family core values around being loving, disciplined, powerful, and generous.
Mm. That's so cool that you spoke into that. I was reading the New York Times this morning, and there was an article about Donald Trump, whether you love him or hate him, but he's bringing Christianity back to the White House. And there were two advisors that he just put into place. I can't recall their names right now. And I thought, wow, that's so interesting because it's like almost like the pendulum swung one way and now it's swinging back.
Yeah, definitely. And that's great. I'm all for that. I just feel like when the at the intersection of politics and religion, there's something going on there that I'm not quite experienced enough or the expert of. But when your religious beliefs are like have so much overlap with politics, I think those are two polarities that are kind of pulling on each other in a weird way. And I'm not the expert in that. I just like for me and my family, we want to serve the Lord and make sure that everything we do is being an example of Christ.
Yeah, I think what the article is talking about is to end the persecution of Christians. And then he did a prayer and he said the J word.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which has been rare from the White House for a long time.
Yeah. So for any of the listeners, we're recording this on Friday, April 18th, and the J word is Jesus, just in case,
Yeah,
because there's an
it is Good
international.
Friday, so I think we'll just have to ask for a pass.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, looking back, are there any pivotal decisions or moments that became legacy defining for you, either personally or professionally?
That's a good question. That's a good question that I'll just have to kind of formalize here. Um, I Nothing specifically comes to mind other than um, I think over time, as I've gotten older, there's this idea of how to conduct myself in business meetings, or when I was younger, excuse me, um, the idea of drinking and just kind of the idea of like how foolishness shows up in my life, right?
Mm,
So when you're young, it's kind of celebrated. Like what you're really saying is, hey, let's go party, let's go be foolish, let's go be free, let's, you know,
let's escape.
and yeah, exactly. And so that's this view of like how sedation plays a role. Like now that I'm older, sedation shows up in my use on social media and who am I really? So I don't waste time. I get the most out of my time. That's kind of a daily affirmation for me. And so when I'm
Mm.
not living up to that, and just how I have approached that and how that's and then finally it caught me a few years ago. There's this proverb that talks about how the values that your parents have shown you and that those are like fine jewelry or fine adornment. I'm paraphrasing, and I should be better about quoting scripture, but the idea is that living a principled life shows up like fine jewelry. And so rather than focusing on like, do I have, a Rolex or do I drive a nice car, that in God's economy, the idea is that if you live a principled life, so if you're the kind of person that has a drink, cuts it off, and doesn't operate in foolishness, that shows up differently to others and is even more noticeable than having fine adornments. So that's kind of shifted my mindset around how I socialize and it also helped with the peer pressure of corporate events or going out for drinks with the guys. It just shows up differently. I think
How do
the other
you,
way, like,
I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you. So how do
that's
you
fine.
navigate that? Because I know my older sister used to work in consulting with Deloitte, and those consultants, they would go and hit the bar, and drinking on the road was just a part of that corporate culture. So how do you navigate that? Do you just have a Shirley Temple?
Yeah, Topo Chico and lime is a great hack for that. Like,
Say it one more time.
Topo Chico and lime, like mineral water and lime.
Okay,
It
okay,
looks like a beverage, but it's not.
okay.
And then, pre-deciding, like just deciding ahead of time, is this an evening I'm going to drink? How many drinks am I going to have? Um, and like you decide ahead of time and then you make that commitment to yourself and you don't budget. Um, I think those like if now some folks like when it comes to like weed, I can't do that. If I were around that, I would overuse like every time
Oh,
because
that's
that would
interesting because in California it's legal, but I don't know if it is in Texas.
it's not in Texas, but that was when I was growing up in Colorado. That was in college in Colorado,
Mm,
and probably people who know me, that would be my drug of choice.
okay.
So I can't indulge in that at all. And it's very clear between my relationship and God that that's off limits. So
That is
that's kind
a,
of a,
yeah, that's
yeah.
a legacy defining moment right there.
Yeah, well, thank you. But yeah, it's just clear to me that that's not something that God wants me to do. It doesn't, it's no longer who I say I am. So I'm not going to do that. Unfortunately, I can be around alcohol. Now, some people can't.
You're
Alcohol
triggered.
is for them like weed is for me.
Okay.
So I just have to abstain in totality from certain things, while others I can moderate. And
Hmm.
you just have to know yourself well enough to know. I think the alcoholism really is the lie that you are like everybody else,
Mm.
or I don't know. There's not a good word for what a pothead is, but it the lie would be that I'm like everybody else. I can moderate that element of my life, and I just can't. Like if I had it, I would use it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for everybody, they got to know what those limits are, and what we're really addressing is foolishness. A heart, like, does my heart favor foolishness? And if it did, then I would continue to use those things.
Thank you for sharing that because you're not the only one. And that is a
Well,
wise, profound question about, you said, does your heart something foolishness?
yeah. So I believe that folks' heart, our sin nature, our human nature, there's four potential heart attitudes that we would struggle with. So they're anger, fear, despair, and foolishness. And
Mm.
so when we're stressed, when we're squeezed by life, the circumstances in life, we will tend to go to one of those four things.
Okay.
So for some people, their go-to is anger. Some people fear, some people despair, and some people foolishness. When I was younger, foolishness was a thing. For me, it's despair. My life is great, but when I feel the squeeze of life, then I will go to despair. And despair shows up like a victim mindset, blaming others. That's what despair kind of looks like.
Pity,
Um,
self-pity.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's where that's kind of my go-to when I'm not my best self, when I'm acting out of my flesh. But through prayer, through reading the word, through just affirmations, you know what? Things are not that bad, and I don't need to catastrophize. I can think through this and figure out what is it that I actually believe, and is what I believe about a situation or a circumstance actually true?
Well, that's an amazing best practice also that probably most people don't think of, including Brendan Burchard, but on bump. Because what you're speaking to is if you feed your soul, your mind, your heart, and you keep feeding it good, nutritious things of the spirit, then your flesh won't default into the despair or that foolishness.
That's
Yeah.
right.
But if
That's
someone's
right.
not
Exactly.
vigilant, especially, you're talking about being founders and entrepreneurs, because that's high pressure many times.
Yeah, we're going to feel the squeeze. Like there's no
Yeah.
way we're not going to feel this, especially in today's market. And so yeah, I had a really good counselor that would ask me at the beginning of the session to rate myself in a bunch of categories, 1 to 10. And the one that really stood out to me that he would always ask is, are you catastrophizing, or are you living in reality? Are you you know are you, because people get stuck there where they're looking at life through a filter of good versus bad, and that is causing them to ride high or crash low. It's because
Mm.
everything that's happening is going through this filter of good versus bad. I think what serves me better is it effective or ineffective? Like, is this
Oh.
circumstance effective or ineffective? Not good versus bad, because good versus bad gives my heart of despair too much ammunition. I can look at something that happened. A client wants to talk about budget. Oh, this is awful, Like, okay, a better way of looking at that might be like, this client needs my help. This client needs my help. How can I help them? Whether that's budget, whether that's hitting a deadline, rather than thinking of it as good or bad, is how can I show up effective versus ineffective?
I think that's brilliant because the mind oftentimes likes simplicity. So good versus bad is that polarity of like victim versus villain, which
That's
I think
right.
that people talk about, the hero, the victim, the villain, like it's very in terms of archetypes. But the better quality question to ask then is what you just had mentioned: is it effective or ineffective? Like when I show up, is how I show up effective, or is that thought process, or is that judgment effective or ineffective? That's like a way better metric and KPI, a key performance indicator.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Am I being effective or ineffective? And um, the other part of that is the meanings that we take from circumstances, they come from us. Like, unless you can take a picture of it or see it, touch it, feel it, it may not be true. So the way that this kind of shows up in my relationship with my wife. If she pulls the pillow up in front of us at night to get comfortable, I might take a meaning from that as rejection.
Mm,
Well, is
mhm.
that true? Is she rejecting me or is she just trying to get comfortable? What was it better for me? So that meaning that I take, that's coming from me. So it's a
Yeah.
bit like how I interpret circumstances could be bigger than the actual problems themselves.
Yeah. Before I go on to the next question, I think that's brilliant what you're speaking into, because a lot of times that internal landscape, we could be setting ourselves up to win, or we could be setting ourselves up to lose. And if we don't check in to think, okay, is that internal conversation working or is it not working? Especially again, because you're a founder, you're a serial entrepreneur. That's again, I think the lifestyle of entrepreneurs is one of the toughest ones out there when it comes to like what you talked about, like needing to escape and the high pressure. So I think that the more that someone is like seasoned and well refined regarding their internal landscape, the better they are then at handling, not just growing their company, but, you know, making it last.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of wayfinding starts with yourself, right? Entrepreneurs are wayfinders, and if they don't find a way, and that starts very much with what's going on in your heart and mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you for speaking into your relationship with Christ, because not every business person is willing to do that. So thank you.
Oh, no, my pleasure. It's too much a part of my identity not to speak about.
Awesome. So you've worked with a wide range of companies. When advising others, what's one often overlooked element of a business of what a business leader could consider when it comes to their legacy? Is it just even thinking about it compared to the short term, or what's maybe one often overlooked element that you've seen because you've worked with a number of companies in your years of experience?
What's coming up for me right there is the difference between being nice and kind.
Okay, and
Um,
differentiate that, please, if you would,
oh
because you're the
yeah, I'd
second
love
person
to.
that said that.
Yeah, so the idea of being nice versus kind is kindness confronts. Kindness cares about the person enough to so people will perform based on what occurs to them. And
Mm,
niceness will not change what occurs to them. It will enable it, it'll make them feel good for feeling good sake. But kindness goes deeper than that. And
okay,
so most folks will end at niceness and not pursue deeper kindness.
I appreciate that you spoke into that, and you're the second person in the serendipity of life that,
Awesome.
yeah. Okay, very cool. I think that it takes a good amount of character to care and to confront, and to do it with love, compared to just like being nice and I want everyone to like me, so I'm just going to give that a pass, whether that's an associate, or any relationship in one's life. Um, yeah, I think it takes a backbone then to be kind, because it's for the betterment of that person, even if they might clap back that moment or need a few days or a week to digest whatever it is that you may have confronted them with.
Yeah. Yeah, because when we want to improve performance, performance is people will act based on what occurs to them. They will like blaze towards their default future. And so the way we improve performance is by talking about what is possible. What does a new future look like? And
Mm,
including them in that process. And that's
mm,
inevitably how we would create a legacy, is we'd say we would talk about what we want the future to look like, and we get ideas from the people in our organization around us. Um, I'll model I don't remember his name right now, I'm blanking, but the founder of Chick-fil-A is a great example of a legacy that has surpassed his life and a lot of the things that they created in their culture. And he did that through including others, making a world-class service experience, and just, having very, very clear core values. And so, yeah, I think being kind is so much more important because we got to confront how people think, what they believe, and really help them see a future that is maybe outside their ability alone and part of what we could do together. We got to paint that future vision, not the future we're headed to if the math all works out, but that future new possibility.
That is low. Can I borrow that?
Sure.
What does a new future look like? Yeah, I think I'd like to borrow that.
Yeah. No,
Well,
this is a great team building discussion. Like this is where we're headed, but what do you guys think is possible if resources weren't the issue? Like don't think about the mechanism. What could be your intention? Like what could we accomplish? Don't worry about the mechanism. Where do we really want to go? What could the future really look like? And your team will impress you. You do have to set the stage because most people will want to talk about mechanism. They'll want to bring in what's possible into that, what they can conceive that they can do with the blockers and the resistance that's in place. But if you can set the stage that those things don't necessarily need to be true, what could we go achieve together if your ideas were materialized? That's a great team building exercise.
yeah, I think it's another very powerful question, and the reason that I'd like to borrow it is because
Sure.
in the world of family businesses, there are all of these acronyms. Like, I'll give you a couple examples. Like, and I know you're not necessarily working within a family business, but like shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, or the teacups to the teacups, or to the stars to the stallions to the. However, I'm botching that, but there's like 10 different varieties of that says basically that the second generation or the third generation are going to screw up what the first generation built. But what's happening
Mm,
these days is instead of focusing on the statistics that most family businesses don't make it, now there's a shift over to like, well, let's look at the strengths of the second and the third generation and not focus in on statistics that are somewhat, looking at the glass as half full. And it is interesting because I think in order to see better results, better questions need to be asked because it's directing the energy of where somebody's going to search for answers in their mind, which then is the trajectory of their time and energy and future.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. Love that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to borrow your. Okay, you've had an open source programming background. How do open source principles like collaboration, transparency, and contribution influence your values and/or legacy philosophy?
So yeah, open source is great for that. The question kind of answers a lot of that. In our organization, expertise, experience really is the currency. So if we're
Mm.
working on a new problem and somebody has experience, they bubble to the top. So we don't have a whole lot of hierarchy or titles or any of that. It's really like, okay, I know this part, and so they're trained in training so that they will help and teach others. And then in organizations, projects tend to kind of hoard information, right? Like this is our project. And so open source principles say like, no, we're going to bubble up everything. We're going to be highly visible in the way that we work. When we work with clients, we're constantly sending information. Everything is available to the client to see all of the velocity, all of the things that are going on, and they can go as deep or stay as high level as they want. So how we maintain visibility in a fast working project is really how we've established our culture. Because we never want a client to feel like, hey, well, what's going on? To have to probe for status. And I think we've gotten a lot from open source working principles. And even in organizations that have projects that aren't necessarily software oriented, they can still leverage some of these ideas, like having a daily stand up rather than organizing a bunch of very formal meetings. The way software teams work can be a model in a lot of ways. I remember when Northwest Airlines got bought by United way back in the 2000s, they used some of those working principles, and were able to do the merger, a very complex merger, in like 90 days because they had a board that had every change that needed to be made. And high-level professionals like VPs were taking sticky notes and going like, okay, I got this one, and they'd move it to in progress. And the board of the entire merger was in a war room, and then they were taking ownership and being responsible for moving that. And so that notion of visibility is what we really take from open source.
Very cool. What do you think are your top 3 or 4 core values?
So our core values spell the word elite.
Oh, that's
So
interesting because
we
I wasn't sure if you were going to say loving and disciplined regarding your shared family core values.
So those are my family core values. My
Okay,
company
okay.
has a different one. They spell out elite. So
Okay.
empowering leadership, innovation, teamwork, and excellence. And
Mm,
then we sell from our core values. So we sell elite teams. And so when you come to us, you can get CTO advisory, but our core product is the service that are these elite teams provide.
that's great. That's awesome that you have the core values clarified for your business as well as your family, because those are truly like the support pillars. Like if I think of the metaphor of a chair, those are the values are the legs to the chair. And so you got a strong chair for your business, you got a strong chair for your family life.
Yeah, and it was interesting as we were coming up with those. Some team members were uncomfortable with this idea of being elite. And I think
Mm.
there's maybe some mob pressure that being elite isn't a good thing. And so that was a really interesting thing for folks to express is that being distinctive in our culture is being shamed.
Well,
And so we
that's,
really
I'm sorry, go ahead,
go
go ahead.
ahead. No,
Well,
no,
I find it so interesting to be the taller blade of grass.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's
say
right.
more, say more.
Yeah, exactly. To be the taller blade of grass, that's a great metaphor. But yeah, it's like to be elite. No, we are different. We do things in a different way at a higher standard. That's not a bad thing. And so yeah, we're using elite more in like the special operations, SEAL Team Six kind of metaphor. But it
Yeah.
was interesting for people to go like, I'm not sure I'm comfortable saying that I'm elite. Like, okay,
Mhm.
why is that? Like, why isn't that? Aren't you like, look what you've accomplished just in your short time with us. That's pretty elite. Like, and so that was a really cool kind of coaching moment where we could see that friction in like, I don't know if I'm comfortable thinking of myself as excellent. And I can definitely relate because as I created our family core values, this idea of being powerful, I would lose my train of thought to think of myself as powerful. I would get it was definitely a thing that I couldn't even wrap my head around what it meant to be powerful. And so as we were thinking about that, it was really interesting. Like, why is it? Why can't I be a powerful person?
Well, well, I think in today's society, it's easier to be a victim.
For sure. And it's
Yeah.
rewarded to some extent. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other part of it is like that idea of not just if the grass is greener on the other side, but it's like, and it doesn't happen with everybody, but it's like, all right, Ben, if you're doing a little better than I am, or if you got a little bit more confidence, am I going to be a crab in the bucket and try and tear you down?
Hmm. Sure.
Yeah. So I don't think it's like that with everyone, but for those that are unhappy in their job and feel like they've got to be slugging through life, the last thing they want to see is like they don't want to be sitting next to that Navy SEAL. And so what ends up
Right.
happening is that Navy SEAL has got to be friends with other Navy SEALs because they're not going to be able to be friends with or relate to somebody that has accepted mediocrity because it's not the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's the 10,000 things over 10, 20, 30 plus years where they then just become disillusioned. Then Ben shows up and he's like, I'm powerful. I'm achieving my dreams. And they look over at you with all those scars.
Sure. Yeah, and totally. I think the special operations metaphor, and I won't take the time to make this story emotional, but one of my coaches shared with me a really emotional story about getting ready for a special operations mission.
Okay.
And they're getting ready. They're all like loaded up, and they go out of the military base, and they have to pass the guard gate.
Okay.
And so one of my jobs as a CEO is to help people understand that they're the guy in the truck that's going out to not just risk, but to create the danger, to go do the mission. They're not
Mhm.
the guard gate that wishes they were in the truck because that guard gate hasn't paid his dues. The guard gate hasn't done the training. The guard gate's not prepared, but the guy
Mhm.
in the truck is prepared. And so, that's the mental shift that the members of my team need to make because they are that guy. They're the person that's going to go make change, not the person's wishing that someone would have mercy on them so that they could be assigned to the truck.
Yeah, what you're referring to is safety and getting out of one's comfort zone because they'll be better for it. Yeah, you're nodding. So for any of the listeners, yeah, he was nodding. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you completely. And I think those that have the sea legs are better for it. And then I also know that many service members come home and they've been a part of this amazing mission, and then they transition to civilian life, and they're like in a grocery store, and they're going, who can I relate to? Because I have been so brave. And what you're speaking about is being brave as a civilian.
That's right. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
in the business
um,
world.
at least in our world, in the software development world, um, I would hope as they go kind of go past that they would, if they were to go to another organization, they would feel something like that, not necessarily PTSD because that's so unfortunate, but they would feel like, hey, wait, this isn't how this is done. We do. There was in my
You're
previous
adding a
company when
higher
I was.
standard. I'm so sorry.
Yes, yeah. Like there was violence of action where I used to be, and there's
Yeah.
no violence of action here. We need to have a little faster pace, and that they would bring that to a future team.
Well, once you plant that seed, you're going to change them the rest of their life, Ben.
Yeah, I hope so.
I also have another metaphor, and again, it's another industry, but I think about somebody like Brad Pitt. Yes, he worked odd jobs when he was first in Los Angeles as an aspiring actor, but then, like, once he tasted the success of that um, revenue, of that income coming in from the movies, that residual income, he couldn't go back to Missouri or wherever it is that he's from and hang out with like his high school buddies. It would be too different. It's like he'd have to become friends with George Clooney. There was like no other way. If not, they end up, in a bubble of who is it that they can relate to without pissing someone off.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some people get
yeah.
very
I hope that
jealous.
there's also some personal depth that comes from breaking through your comfort zone, where you have that impact on others. There isn't. I definitely can relate to like the small talk doesn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
Um, I wanna know what's really going on with even my close friends, and some of them enjoy that. I'm sure some of them don't.
But it's so interesting in a loneliness epidemic today, people need those raw, real, honest, intimate conversations because nobody's asking them. And then once they say it, it's like if you've ever watched a really good coaching session, it's better than any Hollywood movie.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things we do in our family is there's been some great companies. I think Tails is a brand. There's a couple that do these question cards.
Okay.
And so I bought a big box of these question cards for different situations, and some of them were really appropriate for my one of my college age kids to take back to school. But we have a family one on our Lazy Susan that we have in the middle of the table, and it's just there. And now my 6-year-old, when the conversation isn't quite relevant to her, will go and pull a card and she didn't really like to answer them all that much, but we've kind of created this habit of asking some kind of conversational, intentional question to generate quality conversation. And I hope that helps my kids, not to feel lonely, like you were saying.
Well, I think it's brilliant also because the first 10 years of one's life are those impressionable, formative years that build their confidence and build that secure attachment style. Yeah. I do have a
Sure.
question for you. Do
Yeah,
you have a
please.
legacy philosophy?
Other than that family core value, I think that's really going to be the one is living the legacy of Christ for generations to build the king and serve others, or build the kingdom and serve others. That's really going to be, part of that. There's probably something I'm always thinking about that, and if there's a second sentence that would emerge. Um, that legacy philosophy about being elite and those business core values are also like really coming up for me even in my personal life. And maintaining equal commitments, like keeping your commitments as equal rather than prioritizing them on the fly.
Yeah, I think it's just so awesome. Before I move on to the next question, there was that quote. I think Nelson Mandela gets often credited with it, but I think it actually came from like Marianne Williamson or something about how we're not afraid of the darkness, we are afraid of our own light regarding our own potential. And so I think it's just wonderful that you're speaking into it, and especially as a CEO, because you're that pioneering one to go forth. You got to like lead the way through that darkness.
Well, yeah, and my ideal customer are CEOs. So I hope that I'm also supporting a handful
Air
of
vision.
CEOs to do similar. Yeah, because all of my successful ventures have been me coming behind that
Okay.
guy or woman to help them. I think of myself more as a running back than
Okay.
as the quarterback because I love partnering with folks that have really good ideas, know their industry, and are willing to work hard. If you meet those three criteria, then you have all this, like I'll be the science behind that. I'll be all the tech, all the hard work um, to climb that hill with you. And that's really the inspiration for my business and has been the inspiration for my career to partner with those people, those visionaries, and be the integrator behind them.
Very cool. If you could set aside a weekend or two a month for the next year to design a hardcover coffee table book, what images and stories, etc., would fill its pages?
It would be the kind versus the kind versus nice.
Like
It'd be
real
something to like
examples.
bring that home. Yeah, real examples of how you could show up nicely in a situation, and that would be fine. Like
Mhm.
that would be fine. But what would be the second and third order impacts of you being kind in that moment? And just how could you show up differently? I'd enjoy writing that. I'd enjoy thinking about those scenarios because that is the one of my mentors would always say you have to act with edge, and that would be the Act with Edge book, right? Being not just being nice, but being kind.
I think that's brilliant. And I know when I emailed over the questions, I talked about passing that on, even for like the next 100 years. And I had a great grandfather a century ago. He was an insurance broker in the Massachusetts area, and he was very successful, multiple homes, multiple Cadillacs, a maid, etc., just the whole lifestyle. And I always wondered, what if he had just written a book, like a hardcover coffee table book with like pictures and the whole thing of like his best business principles and everything. But he didn't. But a part of the reason he didn't was because no one asked, and he probably didn't think somebody wanted to read it 100 years from now. Well, fast forward to 2025, I'm like, where's the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, finally, for the next generation of CEOs and founders listening today, what's your best advice for designing a legacy that lasts beyond the code?
No, I love that question. I think it's just thinking of some of the things that we've talked about, like taking the time to think about like what is my family's core values. I just until I had been recommended that from a mentor and um, asked to do that, I wouldn't have thought about how impactful that could be. Um, religious institutions and politics have been using identity to help influence behavior for all of history, but we don't often use it as a tool to help ourselves. And so getting clear on who am I and what do I believe about money? What do I believe about relationships? When people die, they don't go, man, I wish I'd social media'd more. I wish I'd worked harder, or I wish I'd it's they get really on your deathbed, you will really care about your relationships. And so being clear about your core values and your mission and your purpose can be super powerful, and it will change your behavior. It will change how you approach your daily life. And
Yeah.
yeah, being clear on that and clear on your why, like why am I doing all of this stuff, is it's so powerful.
Cool. Very cool. What's a good website if the listeners would like to learn more about you?
You can find out more about me on particle41.com. I'm extremely easy to reach out to. You can click on the link on Particle 41 and schedule a call with me. I love to hear from people and figure out how I can engineer their vision. We're visioneers. So what is your vision and how can we help you engineer that vision?
Very cool. We started out today's podcast episode with the question of what if legacy gave you an opportunity to build a network effect with your family and community? And I think we have fulfilled that business promise. And I got a lot out of today's conversation regarding, whether it's asking better quality questions, being that wayfinder. I mean, there was so much. I mean, I just took a page of notes as you were just chatting right now. And also that thinking time you brought up, like, are we doing the right thing in that commitment to ourselves? And also just you've got a set of core values for your personal private life with your family, those shared values, but then you've also got a set of core values that you're very clear on when it comes to your business. And so I think that anyone who is listening right now is going to find both education as well as inspiration. So thank you very much for your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's a great format.
Thank you. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder to Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, USA, but international in those I coach and consult. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources to every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education and preparation in the moat or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. If you're tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, etc., please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends. And if you feel so inclined, send an email to either Ben or myself. Let us know your thoughts and feelings about today's conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Ben, for speaking into your legacy.